Hey everybody, hope you're doing well, and welcome to Inside R Phillies. This is the official podcast of r/Phillies, and this is an idea that we've had for a long time and are super excited to finally get started. This podcast is going to be all about being a calm and rational place to discuss the Phillies. I know that in a lot of corners of the internet, you can't exactly get that discussion, and that's what this is going to be. We want to have guests on this podcast from the subreddit. We want to take questions from the subreddit all the time. We really want this to be an interactive experience that people can feel that they're getting involved and have a place to discuss the Phillies. This is part of a longer term effort that we have into kind of making a transition to being more serious as a subreddit. Another thing that we're working on is getting access to press boxes. Maybe not in the major leagues at first, but minor league access to the press would be really cool to get to talk to the prospects on the Phillies and see what's happening in the future. So more news on that as it comes. It's an ongoing effort that I'm working on, but I wanted to give the listeners of this podcast, our first episode, our pilot episode, a little bit of a sneak peek towards that. So I'm recording this on June 16th, just after the Phillies beat the Miami Marlins in Lone Depot Park. And there's going to be time to get into the game tonight a little bit, but I want to spend some time first and talk about the bigger picture stories about this team, starting with the starter for tonight's game, Mick Abel. Obviously, Mick Abel was drafted early in the decade by the Phillies in the first round. He was a big prospect, had a great first couple of years in the system, but over the last couple of years, he's kind of steadily declined or fallen off of a cliff into barely being a prospect at all, and it was questioned if he'd ever make the major leagues or have any kind of impact whatsoever. His trade value was almost definitely in the dumps coming into this season. However, he has changed things massively with some good starts in Lehigh Valley in AAA to start the year. And he's had a great first few starts here with the Phillies as well. But what I really want to think about is where is Mick Abel going to be at the end of the trade deadline? So come August 1st, where is Mick Abel? Is he going to be a starter with the Phillies still? Is he going to be a reliever on the Phillies? Is he going to be in the minor leagues? Or is he going to be traded to another team? I think that those are the four main options that we're going to talk about, and we're going to go from least likely to most likely. I think that by far the least likely outcome is that Mick Abel is a starter for the Phillies in August. Now, the first reason for that is Aaron Nola. We're not exactly sure how long he's going to be out for, but it doesn't appear that Aaron Nola is going to be out for the season, and there's probably a pretty good chance that he'll be back either early in August or maybe even before August. And Aaron Nola is not going to be doing anything but starting. You can argue that Aaron Nola is not one of the Phillies' 5 best starting pitchers anymore, especially when you count in Andrew Painter and Mick Abel. But Aaron Nola is not going to be done wrong by the team, and Aaron Nola is going to be starting games for the Phillies for the rest of this season and for many seasons in the future. So that pushes Mick Abel back to number 6 in the rotation. And the Phillies have run a 6-man rotation in years past. But it didn't go over well. There were a lot of players on the team, pitchers on the team, that didn't find it to be very effective. It didn't work with their own schedule. Zach Wheeler is probably most notable among them. So I don't personally find it pretty likely that the Phillies are going to go to a 6-man rotation. And then you have the aforementioned Andrew Painter. Andrew Painter, who pretty much ever since he's been drafted, the following year after Mick Abel, has been a better prospect, and he is right now the best prospect in the Phillies system. And the Phillies brass has been absolutely consistent that Andrew Painter is going to be a starting pitcher this year. They're not going to mess with putting him in the bullpen. They are wanting him to be stretched out as a starter, since that is going to be what he is in the future. So if Andrew Painter is going to be a starter, and he's going to be in the major leagues, as has been pretty much alluded to for a very long time now, Mick Abel's now your number 7. So even if Phillies did have a 6-man rotation, Mick Abel's on the outside looking in. So unless you have multiple injuries in the starting pitching, or Aaron Nola's injury turns into something that is a lot worse than we know right now, I don't really think there's any chance that Mick Abel's going to be a starter for the Phillies come August, by the end of the trade deadline. So now you think, okay, we still have him being a reliever with the Phillies, we have him in the minor leagues, and we have him traded to another team. I think the next least likely option is that he's going to be in the minor leagues. And the reason for that is his value right now is at the highest that it's been in a couple of years. Like I said, he's been sliding in value for a couple of years now. And I think that there's a real argument that the Phillies want to cash in on that in one way or another. Either you want to have him be part of the major league club and help out, for a playoff push, or you want to sell high on him and get some more major league talent to help the club this year, or maybe next year. If Mick Abel is in the minor leagues, nothing good can really come from that, right? If he does well in the minor leagues, it helps Lehigh Valley win a championship. Cool, okay, but I don't care, and I'm sure you don't really care either. We want Mick Abel to help the team this year, and that's either going to be him being in the bullpen or trading Mick Abel to bring in team players that can help out the major league club this year. I think his value, if he stays in the minor leagues for the rest of the season or the end of the season, can only go down. So I think that by far the two most likely outcomes for Mick Abel this year is that he's going to be a reliever with the Phillies or traded to another team. And ultimately, I think that the most likely outcome is that Mick Abel is going to be traded to another team. I think that we have a smart front office. I think that there have been warning signs about Mick Abel for a long time. His command has never been good. I know that in a couple of his major league starts, he hasn't walked anybody, and in general, his walk rate hasn't been too egregious. But we know enough about Mick Abel to know that that's not who he is. He is going to walk guys at a higher rate than what he's shown on the Phillies. And there might be a team out there that can take a chance on him. There's probably a team out there that wants young starting pitching, controllable starting pitching, and Mick Abel's a real good chance for somebody to do that. He has the pedigree of being a first-round pick. He has come from a good pitching development team, which the Phillies now are. And I think that there's probably going to be a team that would want Mick Abel and would give the Phillies some major league help back, in the form of relief pitching or maybe a right-handed hitter or an outfielder to complement whatever the Phillies have going on in their outfield right now. So I think that the Phillies are probably going to be trading Mick Abel. But at the same time, if he was a reliever, that wouldn't surprise me all that much. Command isn't as important for relievers since you can kind of just strike your way out through innings in a more consistent way. It doesn't really matter if you bring up your pitch count because you're only probably throwing one inning anyways. And Mick Abel's stuff can play in the bullpen, right? This guy throws almost 100 miles an hour. He gets really good break on his breaking balls. And I don't think you have to worry about the command as much if Mick Abel's in the bullpen. Do I think that he's a long-term bullpen piece? I'm unconvinced. I think that he could potentially be a starting pitcher in the future, and I think that he could be a relief pitcher in the future, and I don't think that's ironed out yet. And because he doesn't have the injury history of Andrew Painter, Mick Abel's thrown the most innings in the minor leagues. If you go back for a couple years, he is an absolute workhorse in the minor leagues, and I think that that's a good sign for him and that he could bounce back and forth with being a starting pitcher and relief pitcher, and you don't really have to worry about it all that much. And I think that stuff, like I said, would really play up. So now I want to talk a little bit about the game tonight against the Miami Marlins. There's a few notable things that happened today, but a couple, less notable things to start. Alec Boehm stays hot. He got some more RBIs today. He had a absolutely dreadful start to this season. Even for someone like Alec Boehm, who's had ups and downs throughout his career, the beginning of this season, that first month or so, was brutal. It was without a doubt the worst stretch of his career, and that includes pretty much all of 2021, which he was one of the worst qualified players for the duration that he was in the major leagues. He was terrible in April this year. I'm sure he knows that. We all know that. There's nothing to hide there. But he's been really good for the last month or so. I think people that know me know that I am not the biggest Alec Boehm fan. I question how good he really is. I think that his highs can be high, but there's a lot of stratification there, and his lows can be really low. But the longer he stays hot, putting the bat to the ball, and especially driving the ball, the more I believe. Now, is he young anymore? No. Alec Boehm's almost 30 years old. But he is at a point in his life, and he has the body where he should be able to drive the ball on a regular basis, and that's what we're seeing more. Hitting the ball hard has never been Alec Boehm's problem. It's been hitting the ball in the air. And the more that we see that, the more I buy into Boehm potentially being somebody that can be very useful for the Phillies, not just this year, but into the future as well. Another notable thing, this was late in the game, the last couple of innings, looked like Bryson Stott was having a problem with his hand or his wrist. I'm not entirely sure what he hurt, but there's now been a little bit of a track record of Bryson Stott getting hurt with his hand and wrist area. Obviously, it came out that last year Stott was playing through an injury, and he was kind of hurt earlier in this year as well. And it kind of has me worried because what does this team do if Bryson Stott is hurt? This is a team that does not have a lot of middle infield depth. We have Edmundo Sosa, who's great, but other than that, what are we doing? Uh, I know that Stott hasn't been great this year, and he wasn't great last year. And his overall, status as a long-term Philly has probably gone down some over the last, year and change. But he's still a pretty good player. He provides a high floor by being a great defensive player, drawing long at bats, and I really like Bryson Stott as a player. And because of that, I think it's important that we get this guy right. I don't want 70% of Bryson Stott. I don't want 80% of Bryson Stott. I want 100% of Bryson Stott for the rest of this season whenever, his injury is fully better. If you have to IL him, that's fine. I don't care so much about these games in June. We have a lot of other guys hurt right now anyways, right? So I think that we can get by teams like the Marlins without Bryson Stott, and I don't think that his production at his diminished state has really been enough to say, hey, we need to keep this guy in the lineup even though he's only 80%. Now, I think the two more notable changes that we saw today is a change to how the Phillies manage games. And starting with that is Nick Castellanos, who was subbed out of right field late in the game as a defensive replacement. At first, I was like, is he hurt? Because we pretty much never see Castellanos leave the game early, even though he's been one of the worst defensive players in the major leagues for a couple years now. And he's pretty much the poster child as to why errors don't really mean all that much in in current baseball, in modern baseball. Because does Nick Castellanos drop balls? No. Does he misplay them? Not really. He just can't get to balls. His range and his speed, which obviously makes the range worse, just makes him a really bad outfielder. And it's something that's a big drag on his value overall, even though he's a fine offensive piece. But him being subbed out to me was really, really good to see. Because I want to see the Phillies making smart choices. Nick Castellanos at this point has about a year and a half left on his contract, and it's probably not very likely that he's coming back to the team after that. I want him to be happy here, but I want to win games with this core while this core is here and while this core is at the age that they're at. And if that means that Nick Castellanos has to get subbed out late in the game to make those defensive changes that make the team more likely to win, I am all for that, and I think we should all be for that because it's what makes this team best. But we also saw changes in the bullpen. Orion Kerkering picked up his first save today. It's been a long time coming, believe it or not. Orion Kerkering, if you look at all of the players throughout Major League history who have never recorded a save entering today, he was one of the best 5 relief pitchers of all time that have never had a save going based on ERA. That's a niche stat. Obviously, your good bullpen pieces are going to end up picking a save at one point or another, like Kerkering got today. But the fact that they went to Romano in the 7th and then went to Kerkering in the 9th, that tells me a lot. Because maybe there's some kind of change there where Kerkering is going to be more trusted than Romano. The Marlins don't have a fierce lineup where you really have to worry about the heart of the order. So I don't think it was some kind of thing like that tonight. And ultimately, they probably are the 2 best pitchers in the Phillies bullpen right now. Matt Strom, he had a shaky inning in the 8th, and I have a lot of questions on how much we can trust him. And Kerkering, to his discredit, he's also had a lot of questions this year. He's been up and down. He struggled with leverage. And I don't really think you can count a 3-run lead against the Marlins as high leverage. If he didn't pull out that save tonight, there would have been real problems and real questions. But he was able to come through with it, and I'm glad that he did. And I'm going to be looking forward to seeing if he sticks as the closer, or if there is going to be a set closer for this team in the future, which we really haven't had since Craig Kimbrell a couple of years ago, and then Hector Neris really before that. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about in this little introductory podcast is the Rafael Devers situation and what this means for the Phillies. Overall, I don't think that the Devers trade is good news for the Phillies. There's the obvious that an amazing player just went from the American League to the National League, and that is going to make it tougher for the Phillies, both in the postseason, potentially getting to the postseason if they're fighting against the Giants for a wild card spot. Something else that I've heard discussed a little bit, but probably not enough, is that Kyle Schwarber, who is going to be a free agent after this season, one of the very best free agent hitters that we're going to see in the free agent market this year. The Red Sox are now a team that might be interested in Kyle Schwarber. With Rafael Devers being gone, that DH spot in Boston is going to be wide open. The Red Sox are still trying to compete. They have an electric farm system that they might want to supplement with some major league talent to really help them make a push. And Kyle Schwarber's played in Boston before. I'm not saying that he's the favorite to land in Boston, but there's a chance now, and there really wasn't one before, and that lowers the chances that the Phillies re-sign Kyle Schwarber. I think that you can make an argument on if Kyle Schwarber should be re-signed by the Phillies. I don't necessarily fully agree with paying aging players deep into their 30s, and the Phillies already have quite a few contracts where they're doing exactly that. But it's impossible to deny that Kyle Schwarber makes the team better right now, and he would make the team better next year as well. So we have to really see a lot on how these, rest of the season goes and how Kyle Schwarber goes and what that contract ends up looking like, because that could end up being a lot bigger than anybody expects. And the second question that I have is, why weren't the Phillies involved in Rafael Devers? He is a star in this league. Is he a great defensive player? No. Does he seem like he's like a locker room angel? No. But he can hit the ball, and I know it's from the left side, and I know that the Phillies already have so many left-handed hitters, but the Phillies don't have a great offense. I know that a lot of their stats are good, but they're really missing power, and that's power that Rafael Devers can absolutely provide. And I think that there's an argument that Bohm has been better recently, and why do you want Devers? If you have Bohm, what are you doing with that? And I think there's a couple ways you can go with that. Number one, Kyle Schwarber, who definitely looks more athletic than he has before. If we don't care about defense, just put Kyle Schwarber back in the outfield and DH Devers, or do whatever you want there. We had Rhys Hoskins play here in the outfield in 2018. If Rhys Hoskins played the outfield, and he was terrible, but if he did it and that was a team that came close to making the playoffs and they were winning the National League East for most of the season, I think that we could do that with Kyle Schwarber in the outfield this year. And then also, I don't necessarily know how tied the Phillies are going to be to Alec Bohm going after this year. He's heading into his third year of arbitration. Every year in arbitration, obviously, the amount that you're paying a player goes up massively. And if he has a slow or a mediocre second half of the season, Alec Bohm could be a potential non-tender. I know that sounds kind of crazy right now after this hot month that he's had, and I hope that that hot month continues. But I'm not 100% sure that Alec Bohm is going to be here next year. Overall, I think that the Phillies are in an interesting spot right now because they are committed to this team. They're financially committed to this team. The fans are sick and tired of the way that the last few postseasons have gone. And I think that the fans this year have kind of been a little more checked out. Just wait until October. You haven't seen as many people at the games this year. Obviously, a lot of sellout stills, a lot of very full, stands at Citizens Bank Park. But you look at the games even this past weekend and you had crowds that were like 40,000 instead of 44,000, which is surprising, right? In the last run that we had, 2007 through 2011, you'd be hard to find a ticket any night. And the fact that weekend games with school getting out still aren't completely sold out, that tells me that the fans aren't as believing in this team as they have been in the past. At the end of the day, the Phillies have a choice to make this year, and that's how much do they want to give this core their best chance to win. Obviously, everybody is older than they were a couple years ago, and once players hit 30, they start to decline, although not that fast at first. For more or less, Bryce Harper is just about who he was a couple of years ago. Kyle Schwarber is just about who he was a couple of years ago, maybe even better. Same with Trey Turner. I think the only guy you're really seeing decline in right now is JT Realmuto and maybe Aaron Nola, though the injury might have had something to do with that as well. But at some point, aging is going to hit every single player on the Phillies right now. And this is an old team full of players in their 30s. I would not be opposed to going all in while we can, reasonably all in, and give this core their best chance to win and complete the journey that they should have completed in 2022 and 2023. It still irks me every day that the Phillies did not win one of those two championships. Last year doesn't even bother me at all compared to 2022 and 2023. The other option, and I think that this is the more likely option, is that the Phillies have a trade deadline similar to what they've had in the past, and they kind of stand pat while making, some kind of minor improvements, probably getting another platoon outfielder to hit from the right side, and probably adding at least one player to the bullpen, but not really any change to the structure of the team. But you're also not really selling off any of the future that way either. I think that the Phillies are in for a very interesting rest of the season, and I'm excited to talk about that all on this podcast. If anybody has any ideas or any topics that they want me to talk about in the future, please let me know. And if anybody wants to potentially be a guest on this podcast at some point in the future, please let me know of that as well. I'm going to be uploading at least one episode a week. I'm going to shoot for at least 2 a week, and I think I can probably do that. And of course, give me any suggestions or anything that you want me to incorporate in the future. I appreciate you all listening to this first episode of Inside R Phillies, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Go Phils!